little bit harder to Fatal Push a tracker than it is Dark Confidant as well.
Now, if you missed Peter's match 2 rounds ago, his build of Affinity set up better for these fair fights. 4 copies of Thoughtcast in the main. He's gotten away from some of the creatures that more easily die to removal, shaving cards like some copies of Steel Overseer and even taking a Vault Scourge. He's got 2 Welding Jars, so all this I think will help him against Abzan.
It gives you a lot of mileage against Jund and Grixis. Quite a bit less against the white versions of these decks, however. When you start running into Lingering Souls, Stony Silence, these cards matter a lot less.
Yeah, there's no clean answer to those. So a turn 1 Inquisition of Kozak from Charles will show what Peter is up to. We see 2 lands, both Blinkmoth Nexus. We see Cranial Plating, Arcbound Ravager, Memnite Ornithopter, and then
Mox Opal, I want to say.
Yeah, it's one of the inventions. Yeah, it looks like Mox Opal. So 2 payoff cards, 2 lands, and 3 enablers. This is a great start for Affinity. It's not immediately, it doesn't just fold to one of these discard spells.
Yeah. It won't be able, you have 3 artifacts there. If you take one of those, then Peter won't be able to cast one of these payoff cards on turn 1. But the one that's left behind, because he has 3 0-mana artifacts, he'll be able to use the Opal plus a land to just cast this Cranial Plating on turn 1. As you see, Arcbound Ravager was the take.
Yeah, I was interested in whether he'd take Ravager, which is the biggest payoff card, Ravager or Plating, or whether or not he might actually take Mox Opal to slow him down. It decides he's going to let Peter get the quick start here, as you see, turn 1 Cranial Plating with all the zeros.
If he's setting up for Lingering Souls, not terribly difficult to just get ahead of Cranial Plating, just perpetually putting blockers in the way. A little bit tougher to beat Ravager with that one. If you have 2 removal spells, you're generally pretty good against Ravager.
And it looks like he has an Abrupt Decay set up for the Cranial Plating.
That one will do it too.
Yeah, that'll force Peter to draw another threat off the top.
Only 2 Abrupt Decays in the deck, and looks like 1 Maelstrom Pulse as well. But they are very good here. Certainly lines up cleaner against the Plating than an Arcbound Ravager.
So turn 2 here, it's going to be Grim Flare for Charles Reese. Look at his graveyard. He's got land and sorcery so far, so Flare's still a 2/2 for the time being.
And Charles can afford to take a little bit of damage.
Yeah, I was going to say, he does have the Abrupt Decay. Going to wait a turn before firing that off on the Plating. He'd like to get some sort of advantage in play, something like Grim Flare.
And once the Flare starts connecting, he has a little bit more control over his draw step, so getting this down early does make some sense. In particular, Reese knows that Tubergen's on this heavy Thoughtcast version, this light Galvanic Blast version. That gives him a bit more life to play with. He's just way less likely to die outside of combat.
Right. Yeah, and he may not know that. I think once he starts seeing a Thoughtcast get cat, if he sees Peter use a Thoughtcast, then he may start respecting Galvanic Blast less.
Yeah, you almost never see somebody going heavy on both of those cards.
See Hope of Girapur from Peter. This is a 1-of in his main deck.
Yeah, against the Lingering Souls decks, you got to figure this is the worst matchup for a card like this.
Yeah, it's not going to be great. It has some play against combo decks. Now, if Charles doesn't draw Lingering Souls, this might be fine.
You also might see a spot where you put Charles in Lingering Souls or bust territory.
So he plays Hope, equips Cranial Plating to Ornithopter, activates a Blinkmoth Nexus, and attacks. So we see, we'll count up the damage here in a second.
It's like 6.
Yeah, Charles down to 10. So 2 flyers and a Cranial Plating. That is some healthy damage there. Grim Flare is going to attack in. Peter could double block. That would seem awfully aggressive.
Yeah, a removal spell just blows that wide open. Though taxing Reese's mana is worth something, but not that much.
Yeah, Peter will go to 18, and we'll get a Grim Flare trigger. Top 3 cards. Charles can put any number in the graveyard. You see Lingering Souls among them. That's really powerful in this deck.
Yes. Nice thing about it, if Reese wanted to, he could just put that right into the graveyard and then flash it back.
Right. And he does still have that Abrupt Decay available.
2 Lingering Souls in the graveyard. How about that?
Ooh, okay, well that sets up for a great turn 4. See plenty of threats in hand. He'll just pass.
Signaling that he has
something
at least 2 mana of interaction, just not flashing back Lingering Souls there.
Peter's going to play another Ornithopter. Right, there's only one real card in play here, and that's the Cranial Plating. That second ability on Hope of Ghirapur not really going to play against Knobs on deck.
No, just a 1/1 flyer. Once these Lingering Souls start getting flashed back, that turns a lot of this off.
Full swing here from Peter. Activates Blink Moth as well. Trying to push as much damage as possible here, knowing that once those Lingering Souls flash back, he's going to be left with few good attacks. So Abrupt Decay will hit the Cranial Plating. And 3 damage will come across Charles down to 7. And likely 6 on end step.
Peter has to make a decision with the Hope here. If he thinks that it's at all possible to win this turn, and/or thinks that he can't win if these Lingering Souls flash back, then you just want to sacrifice the Hope.
So up until Peter's next turn, Charles cannot deal combat. Charles cannot cast non-creature spells. So there's 1 turn off those Lingering Souls. A bold play there by Peter. Got Charles down to 6. We'll see if he can convert.
It was going to be really tough to connect with 1/1 flyers once Reese starts flashing back Lingering Souls.
Another Grim Flare is picked up for Reese. That one's not going to help too much.
So with 4 artifacts here and then 2 creature lands, depending what's left over in Peter's hands, there's some draws, say Arcbound Ravager or Cranial Plating could be lethal in the following turn.
Master of Ethereum is close. Grim Flare is going to swing. It's still a 2/2. Only 3 card types in Charles's graveyard. May actually be a 4/4. I think you have a Liliana hiding under the Lingering Souls. He'll put all 3 into the graveyard. It's a 3rd Lingering Souls. I don't know if he'll get... The game's going to go long enough for him to use all of those.
Yeah, definitely won't be able to use any this turn.
Right, that Hope of Ghirapur in the main helping Peter out. It's just going to be another Grim Flare for Charles, and he passes with a Temple Garden up.
This is going to be a pivotal turn for Peter.
And Peter, he does have his one of Galvanic Blast in hand.
That's going to do it.
Puts Charles to 2, and Pieter Tubergen wins game 1. And Hope of Ghirapur really just stealing the game for Peter. It's a card, you know, when it first came out, I kind of looked at it as this Xantid Swarm card that Affinity might be able to play. I haven't seen it in too many lists, but right there, that was exactly what Peter needed.
Yeah, this is not the kind of matchup where you would expect him to be able to leverage it a lot, but yeah, just to beat Lingering Souls, it did the job.
So we'll go look at the sideboards for each player here. So starting off on Charles Reese with Obzon, it's a matchup which you generally like. Now there's a big one here, of course, in the sideboard that just helps him out a ton. That's going to be Stony Silence.
Stony Silence is great. He has some sweeper effects as well. The Flaying Tendril is a little bit more inviting than Damnation just because of mana efficiency. You might see Maelstrom Pulse just as an answer to Cranial Plating. It's a little bit slow, but Fulminator Mage is actually pretty good against Affinity. You just want to make sure to kill everything, creature lands being a thing.
Yeah, do you like the card like Collective Brutality? It is a kill spell. It's a bit pricey.
The issue is you're never meaningfully escalating Brutality.
Sure, the only mode that matters is the -2/-2.
2 life is kind of whatever. The -2 is that sorcery speed, which is really unfortunate. And looking at their hand, you're just really never meaningfully duressing them.
Yeah, so expect to see Stonies, Pulse, Tendrils, perhaps some number of Fulminators.
Yes.
Now on Peter's side, you mentioned he's playing 4 Master of Ethereum in the main, all his Etched Champion in the sideboard. It's a real big steal for him to get game 1, as I assumed he'll be on these Etched Champions going forward.
Yep, you're going to want these Etched Champions to punch through Lingering Souls to survive removal spells. And the rest of the sideboard, we have a couple copies of Gearport Ether Grid. Those are really good against, you want those for Stony Silence, just because you can tap those useless artifacts to do some damage, and they're also good at fighting Lingering Souls. So those are the kind of cards that you want in this matchup.
Yeah, now we've seen that sideboard Blood Moon out of Pieter. Blood Moon's been really good this tournament. Now Peter's on the draw. Do you like it in this matchup?
Not on the draw. On the play, you can really turn off the Abzan deck's mana. In particular, if you get this turn 2 off of Mox Opal, that's really nice.
Sure, certainly within range. Yeah, Etch Champion we'd expect to see. I'm not sure I'd like anything else out of the board.
Yeah, Ether Grid, Etch Champion, those are the big hits.
So Gearport Aether Grid, is that because of Lingering Souls that you might see it?
And Stony Silence. It just lines up against both of the problematic cards.
So the activation of Aether Grid's on the enchantment, so you can still use it under Stony Silence.
Right.
Okay. Well, they're going to get ready for a second game. Now, at Starsea Games, if you haven't seen it yet, over at our store, we have the Tarmo die. You can keep track of your creature's power and toughness and style. I wonder what creature we could mean. That would be a Tarmogoyf. You can get 1 for all your Tarmogoyfs, or you can get a set of 4 for your play set of Tarmogoyfs. Both are available at starcitygames.com/Tarmo-die.
1 for you and 1 for 3 of your friends. Your Tarmogoyf slinging
you
friends.
And all your friends who just, all your Jund decks.
All 3 of your Tarmogoyf playing friends. The Jund squad, as I'm sure you call yourselves. Could each have your own Tarmo
I feel like
die.
every city has, you know, there's those guys who like, they all go to the tournament together and everybody in the car plays Jund. It's like, oh, it's those guys.
I used to pride myself on my ability to pick out Jund players in a crowd when Bloodbraid Elf was in Standard. That guy's playing Jund. That guy's playing Jund.
What, you just like walk to the top tables of the room and then you just start going down the line?
Tables 1 through 8.
they're playing. Yeah, that's.
Those people are all playing Jund.
He's probably playing Jund.
See that table 53? They're not.
That was nice. Like show up to a Standard tournament, not really know what was going on. Top 8. It's nice. It's kind of play. Look at my mana. Say, what's the biggest card I could play this turn? Should probably play that one.
I spend all my mana. Looks like this one makes 8 power worth of dragons. Guess I'll cast that one.
Yeah, that's nice.
This one could be anything, though.
But
Bloodbraid
they're all
Elf,
good. They're all
anything
good.
could happen, but all of them are good. Maybe my opponent discards 2 cards. Maybe I kill their only creature. It's all upside.
One of my favorite decks from that era. If you ever look at old block constructed decks, there's a deck where it was 4 Blightning, 4 Esper Charm,
Yes.
a stack of tap lands, and every other card the deck had Cascade on it.
Tribal Mind Rots.
No matter what you played, it ended in a Mind Rot. I remember watching some players test the mirror. And the big thing they're like is when I play my 5, I really hope I hit a 4 before I Mind Rot my opponent. It's like, this is stupid. Turn 1 tap land from Charles Reese. See Welding Jar, Mox Opal, Darksteel Citadel, Hope of Gearpur for Peter.
So the turn 1 Opal was active, but this is not the payoff that Peter wanted.
He's got a Welding Jar to protect a great turn 1 play, and it's going to be Hope of Gearpur.
And can you beat Flying Men?
Yeah.
I'm expecting a turn 2 Etch Champion or Master of Ethereum if this is the start.
Another Hope. No, that would... Grim Flare on turn 2, though, for Charles Reese. Not taking any damage off his own lands.
May not look like much, but this one is legendary.
Ha! That's why okay, that's why you can only play 1 in the main. Charles will go to 19 on the attack here. And yeah, we're waiting for the follow-up. And how about Blood Moon? And he caught him. Charles doesn't have any basics.
Yikes.
Or fetch. No, this is...
Okay. That's a payoff.
You knew there was going to be a big 3-mana spell. Well, let's see if Grim Flare can find some basics. Swings on in.
It helps.
What are we? He's got 1 plains, 1 forest, 2 swamps.
So here's the bad news. Never possible to cast the flashback on Lingering Souls again, because there's just no swamp in the deck.
Well, no, he's got 2. He's got 2 swamps.
Oh, there it is.
He's got 1 forest, 1 plains, 2 swamp.
You got to find it, though.
You know, what I like is it makes these Grim Flare triggers really easy decisions.
Giant Master of Ethereum.
Well, now I don't know how we're going to get any more Grim Flare triggers. Now we have to just draw the basics.
A little harder. Also the Hope coming in for 2 now.
Okay. Yeah, Charles to 17. Nope, no basic that turn.
Mountain off the top for the Abzan player.
You know, we've seen a lot of this today. Players, just 3-color control players getting absolutely wrecked by Blood Moons.
Blood Moon, really popular out here in Charlotte. Powerful. It's just been closing games. It's been happening on turn 2 a lot as well. We've seen some desperate rituals in the Blood Moon.
There's only one in Peter's sideboard, but boy.
I thought that it was going to be like turn 2 Edge Champion. I was pretty jazzed about that. You know, we have a fun game going.
Yeah, just get got. He didn't have any basics.
No fear. That Grim Flayer cannot race my Master.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 artifacts. Master's a 6/6. Hope's a 2/2. That's for 8. It's going to be lethal next turn.
I think it's 7 for the Master.
Ooh, am I missing one? Oh, you're right, I am. So how about that? So this is for 9. Charles goes to 8.
Fun quirk with Blood Moon and Darkstill Citadel. Despite being a mountain, it maintains several qualities you wouldn't expect it to. It's still indestructible, because that makes sense.
Wait, what? It's indestructible?
I'm pretty sure. Because it's not a static ability, it's a defining
Blood Moon
characteristic.
is so confusing. That's why I just play decks that concede when they cast it, because that's the easier way to do it. You know, I don't have to know the rules interactions when I just say, oh, I lose.
You see the sacrifice on Hope of Girapur?
Just in case he drew.
Not?
In case. Here's Ornithopter. Here's Cranial Plating. Equip. Swing. Okay. That's 2 lethal attackers. And that is going to do it. At the end of 1 day of competition and 9 rounds of play, it is Pieter Tubergen on Affinity. He is your lone undefeated player.